Either remove that unsightly shed or prepare to face legal repercussions. That's what our HOA president shouted at my wife over a minor shed violation. Karina, our overzealous HOA queen with her trusty clipboard, believed she could strong-arm anyone in the neighborhood. What she didn't know was that my wife had the kind of authority that could bring entire systems to a grinding halt with a single signature. What began as petty bullying over a storage shed spiraled into the most unforgettable Karen downfall you'll ever hear about. Watching this self-proclaimed queen of the block go from barking orders to absolute panic, pure gold. The reversal was so deeply satisfying, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. And Drama Nest viewers, drop a comment and tell us where you're tuning in from. Let me paint the picture for you. It was one of those rare, blissful Saturday mornings in our peaceful suburban neighborhood, the kind where staying in sounds better than any plan to go out. My wife Anna was at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee while her fingers danced across her laptop keyboard. To anyone else, it might have looked like casual browsing or replying to a few emails, but I knew better. Those weren't random emails, they were classified briefings from her job in federal law enforcement. That intense, focused look she had, that's the same one she wore when cracking serious cases. Meanwhile, I was outside, messing with the old shed, just trying to fix a loose board that had been annoying me for weeks. The shed itself wasn't much, a simple wooden structure holding our mower, garden tools, and leftover boxes from our move 3 years ago. But to Anna, it was more than just storage. During one of those deep, late-night chats we sometimes have, she told me how this shed symbolized something deeper. You know, she once said, gazing out the window toward it, this shed isn't just a place for tools. Back when I was still in the field, I stored important equipment here. It also held our wedding photos when we first moved in. It's like the place where justice meets love. That morning, she wandered outside, coffee in hand, and watched me work. She had that quiet smile she gets when she's thinking about more than what's in front of her. Kind of heavy for a Saturday morning, I joked when she started talking about how battles don't always need bullets. Sometimes, it's just about knowing what's worth fighting for. If only I knew then just how true her words would be. We were fully enjoying our peaceful morning, blissfully unaware that our weekend was about to be interrupted by the ultimate Karen showdown. The doorbell rang, and something about the tone just felt hostile. Anna and I shared, okay, this wasn't expected. Friends usually texted if they were stopping by. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a satirical sketch. Miranda Foster stood there in a stiff navy blazer that practically screamed authority figure, wielding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her sleek, blonde bob was immaculately styled, and her oversized glasses caught the sunlight in a way that made her look like a comic book villain. "Good morning. I'm Miranda Foster, HOA president," she declared with the kind of self-importance usually reserved for judges or generals. "We need to discuss your unauthorized structure." She then pointed dramatically at our modest shed like it was leaking toxic waste. The level of disdain in her voice when she said unauthorized structure made it sound like we'd constructed a nuclear reactor back there. What followed could only be described as a Karen masterclass. Miranda pulled out a tape measure and began inspecting every inch of our shed with CSI-level thoroughness. She muttered phrases like "definitely out of compliance and violates our standards" while scribbling furiously and snapping photos from every possible angle, even crouching low to capture dramatic, artsy shots. Then she broke out the HOA handbook. Oh yes, the dreaded regulations. Miranda began reciting clauses and subsections like scripture. According to HOA Bylaw 15.3, Section B, Subsection 4, she intoned, all external structures must conform to visual harmony standards and obtain prior committee approval. She spoke with such mechanical confidence, it was like she rehearsed in front of a mirror. "I'd really hate for this to become a bigger issue," she added, her voice dripping with condescension. "But rules are rules, and some people think they're above them." Anna had been quietly observing from the porch, assessing the situation like it was just another case file. As Miranda finished her grand performance, Anna stepped forward with a calmness that should have served as a warning flare. "Interesting take on neighborhood enforcement," she said politely, her tone light but with a sharpness beneath the surface that even I felt in my spine. "What happens if we need more time to resolve this the right way?" Miranda's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Well, of course, there would be penalties. Legal actions, potentially. I have close contacts in city offices, you know. People learn quickly not to take my warnings lightly." She was practically glowing with self-importance. What she didn't realize was that she'd just triggered something in Anna. My wife gave me a subtle glance, one I'd come to know well over our 5 years together. That look meant business. It meant someone was about to regret their choices. Miranda had no clue she'd just walked into a storm. Then Anna, casually but with perfect timing, dropped the first subtle bomb. "You might want to recheck the property lines in the HOA paperwork," she said gently. Anna's tone was so kind and disarming, it caught Miranda off guard. For just a moment, the confident look on her face faltered. Curious, I went inside to grab our home records, wondering what Anna had in mind. As I flipped through the folder and landed on our original property survey, my jaw nearly hit the floor. "Hey, Miranda," I called out, holding up the document. "This part of the yard where the shed sits?" It was officially grandfathered in before the HOA even existed. The color drained from Miranda's face so quickly, I genuinely thought she might collapse on the spot. "That's not possible," she stammered, her carefully polished composure beginning to crack. "I've been overseeing this neighborhood for 5 years." But Anna stood calmly, a serene smile playing on her lips, entirely unfazed by Miranda's unraveling. "Sometimes the oldest parts of a place hold the most fascinating stories," she said gently. The way she said it made me realize something deeper was going on, like this conversation was only the surface of a much larger story. Miranda, now visibly rattled, spent the next several minutes frantically rifling through her own paperwork, mumbling under her breath and casting anxious glances toward the shed as if it might suddenly grow arms and wave a red flag. Eventually, she tried to regain her posture, smoothing her blazer and raising her chin with a forced sense of authority. "This isn't finished," she declared. "Grandfathered or not, the structure still violates the community's aesthetic expectations. You have 48 hours to address the appearance, or my legal team will be in touch." She spun on her heel and stomped toward her sparkling white SUV, snapping more photos along the way as if gathering evidence for a courtroom showdown. As she pulled away, our neighbor Mr. Williams looked up from tending his roses and shook his head with a weary sigh. "She's been a handful since the day she moved in," he called over, his voice heavy with years of experience. "Good luck dealing with her." But this is where things started to get really interesting, and where I should have realized Anna wasn't playing the same game as everyone else. The moment Miranda drove away, Anna took out her phone, and not to document our shed, but to quietly take a picture of Miranda's license plate. Puzzled, I asked what she was doing. Anna turned to me with those sharp, brilliant eyes, the same ones that first pulled me in when we met 7 years ago. "Sometimes, the history behind old things reveals more than people expect," she repeated, this time glancing between our modest shed and Miranda's fading taillights. Then she added something that sent a chill down my spine. "But what if this was never really about the shed at all? Let me know if you're starting to see it too." Just type "hey" deeper if you think Anna knows something that even I don't. Those 48 hours Miranda had given us turned out to be far more eye-opening than I ever expected, but not for the reasons you might think. While I immediately shifted into damage control mode, planning to slap on some paint or tidy up the shed just to avoid further chaos, Anna gently stopped me in my tracks. "Hold off on any major changes," she said, calm and firm. Her voice wasn't panicked. It carried that quiet certainty I'd come to trust without question. "Just trust me." It wasn't a suggestion, it was Anna in her element. She knew something I didn't, and I wasn't about to second-guess it. While I worried about legal threats and neighborhood gossip, Anna moved with this quiet sense of purpose. Over those next 2 days, she spent hours behind her closed office door, her fingers moving quickly over her keyboard. She made call after call, spoke in hushed tones, and occasionally left the house without much of an explanation beyond a casual work errand. I never pressed her. In our relationship, I learned early on that some parts of her federal job were off limits, but something about her behavior now was different, a quiet intensity, like she was aligning chess pieces before a big move. Meanwhile, Miranda wasn't sitting idle either. She'd gone full power trip. On the second day, I found a formal letter from the HOA taped directly to our mailbox. Not mailed, physically delivered and plastered there like a legal notice. It was a list of violations, demanding the removal of our non-compliant structure within 7 days. Failure to comply, it warned, would result in escalating penalties and possible legal steps. The language was clearly designed to be intimidating, and honestly, it worked on me. I seriously considered dismantling the whole thing just to avoid the nightmare. But Miranda wasn't satisfied with paperwork. Oh no, she turned into a one-woman HOA campaign machine. I watched from the kitchen window as she went door to door through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, pitching herself like she was running for office. I could tell she was trying to rally support, probably for some kind of petition. Later that evening, I bumped into our neighbor Sandra while checking the mail. She hesitated before mentioning that Miranda had asked her to sign something, a document about keeping up community appearances, she said. The way Sandra avoided eye contact said it all. She probably signed, and I couldn't blame her. Miranda had that way about her, a pushy, intense, hard to say no to. But that evening, as Anna and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, I asked her something that shifted my entire view. Do you ever get scared? You know, in your line of work? She was quiet for a long time, eyes fixed on the shed that had become the center of all this chaos. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd heard in weeks. Sometimes, she said quietly. There was something in Anna's voice, Dana, a rare vulnerability that I hadn't heard before. But not when you're beside me, she added softly. A couple years ago, I worked a case that turned dangerous. The threats got very real, and for weeks afterward, every unexpected noise made me jump. But with you, I feel completely safe. David, you're the one person who makes that possible. Her words stopped me in my tracks. This woman is so composed, so capably, wasn't just strong. She trusted me with the part of her that didn't always feel unshakable, and that trust meant everything. It also made me wonder what kind of cases she was involved in, what kind of darkness she faced in her work that could leave such a lasting impact. But I knew better than to ask. Some parts of her job were off limits, and I respected that boundary. Then came the next escalation from Miranda. Of course, I was getting ready for the day when I heard loud voices outside. Glancing out the window, I spotted Miranda pacing along the sidewalk, cell phone pressed to her ear, speaking loudly enough for half the street to hear. "Officers, I need you to respond immediately," she said, her voice dripping with urgency. "There are residents refusing to comply with HOA regulations. They're being combative toward leadership." It was so theatrical, I almost laughed. But 20 minutes later, sure enough, a police car pulled up out front. 2 officers approached the Rodriguez, who looked like he'd been through every neighborhood conflict imaginable, and Kim, a younger officer who seemed unsure why they were even called. "Sir, we received a report about a possible obstruction issue," Officer Rodriguez said, clearly not thrilled to be here. The sigh in his voice when he muttered again under his breath made it obvious this wasn't the first Miranda incident he'd responded to. Anna stepped forward with such composed professionalism that I wondered how Miranda ever thought she could outmatch her. She calmly walked the officers through our property records, explained the shed's grandfathered status, and never once raised her voice. She even managed to shift the tone without being aggressive, via something Miranda had failed to do from the start. At one point, she subtly handed Officer Rodriguez what looked like a business card. The move was so smooth, I almost missed it. After a short conversation, the officers thanked us and left, clearly seeing we weren't the problem here. But if you thought that would stop Miranda, you'd be giving her way too much credit. Later that same day, she returned, this time with backup. A middle-aged man in an awkwardly fitting suit accompanied her, introduced as her legal advisor. I later discovered he was her cousin, a paralegal at some small-town law firm, but Miranda spoke about him like he was her personal legal assassin. He even handed us a business card, doing his best to look intimidating while explaining our supposed legal exposure if we didn't follow HOA guidelines. The whole thing felt like a poorly written courtroom drama, but Anna listened to every word with complete sincerity, asking pointed questions that seemed to rattle both Miranda and her faux lawyer sidekick. When they finally left promising legal action and whatever else they could dream up, Anna simply watched them go with that same calm, unreadable smile. That evening, as we sat in the living room, I finally asked her what she'd really been working on behind all those closed doors and quiet phone calls. "Do you think maybe it's time we let the HOA know what you do?" I asked gently. "You know, the whole federal government part of it?" But Anna shook her head. "If I reveal that too soon, we might lose the bigger picture," she said, her voice shifting into that focused, no-nonsense tone I'd learned to associate with her work mode. "I've been tracking financial inconsistencies in HOA operations across this area for months, and based on how she's acting, Miranda might be involved." My stomach dropped. Involved in what, exactly? Anna opened her laptop and brought up a spreadsheet. At first glance, it was just a mess of numbers and data, but the look in her eyes told me it meant much more. "Money always leaves traces," she said quietly, "and people who abuse little bits of power often hide much bigger things." She pointed to a line on the screen. "Look here, the HOA reported $47,000 for gate repairs last year. But that gate hasn't changed a bit since we moved in." Before I could process that, a knock at the back door startled us. It was Mr. Williams, our neighbor, and apparently, he'd been paying close attention to Miranda's antics. "I heard enough of that drama to figure something was off," he said, stepping inside. "And I thought this might be useful." Then he dropped the real bombshell. "Miranda's nephew? He's the one who did that so-called $30,000 garden project she keeps bragging about. Took him 2 days and maybe used $500 worth of plants. Spent more time taking selfies than working." Anna's eyes lit up, not in surprise, but with that laser-sharp focus I'd seen when she was close to cracking a case. She pulled out a slim notebook I didn't even know she carried and began jotting things down quickly. "There's a pattern here," she murmured. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't just about a garden shed. Anna wasn't handling the neighborhood food as she was knee-deep in a federal investigation, and somehow, Miranda had stepped right into the middle of it. And just when we thought the day's surprises were over, Miranda returned with what she clearly thought was a power move, a broken bar, but what actually turned out to be a massive misstep. From the kitchen window, I watched as Miranda made another call, probably reaching out to one of her so-called connections, clearly trying to keep up the pressure. But whatever she heard on the other end of the line didn't go the way she expected. Even from across the street, I saw the shift in her expression. Her confidence slipped. The call ended quickly, and she glanced around the neighborhood like a cornered animal. For the first time since all this began, Miranda Foster didn't look intimidating as she looked afraid. Anna had been watching, too. When the call ended, she turned to me with a small, knowing smiley, part pleased, part dangerous. "Interesting," she murmured. "Even her allies are backing away." I stared at her, the full weight of what was happening starting to hit me. "What exactly are you working toward?" I asked, but Anna just gave me that enigmatic smile she wore so well, eyes still fixed on Miranda as she disappeared down the sidewalk. "The real question," she said softly, "is what happens when someone who thought they controlled everything realizes they never had any control at all." Anna Drama Nest viewers, drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Miranda's so-called allies will stand by here a broken bar or leave her out to dry? The next part of this neighborhood saga began when Anna took things to the next level. She sat down at her laptop and composed a formal complaint to the city councilor calmly, precisely, like someone who had done this kind of thing many times before. She laid out every detail, the repeated harassment, the absurd HOA overreach, and the suspicious financial behavior Miranda had been proudly flaunting. Anna cited city regulations and requested a formal investigation into HOA governance under Miranda's leadership. I'll admit, I felt a surge of confidence. We had solid evidence. Our shed was legal. Miranda's behavior was out of line. We were in the right. That optimism didn't last. Not long after, we received a letter on official city stationery, signed by a member of the Development Review Board. But the contents made my heart drop. The letter praised Miranda as a respected community leader and said our complaint would need more time due to the complex nature of local governance. In other words, it was being buried. I felt like giving up right then and there. "She's got the system protecting her," I said, completely deflated. "It doesn't even matter if we're right. It was deeply unsettling to realize someone like Miranda could hide behind bureaucracy and connections. But Anna didn't flinch. "Maybe," she said thoughtfully, "but soon, they'll have much more reason to protect themselves instead of her." And just like that, she was back in action. Now I understood why she'd remained so composed through all of Miranda's stunts. Anna had been patiently collecting data, waiting for the moment when it all aligned. She opened her laptop again and pulled up a series of documents I hadn't seen before: real financial records from HOA filings, expense sheets, even vendor invoices. "David, can you look at something for me?" she asked. "With your background in programming and numbers, do these totals seem legit to you?" What I saw made my stomach turn. The HOA had been spending money like it was managing a five-star resort, not a modest suburban neighborhood. The numbers were outrageous. One entry showed $80,000 for a playground renovation. I remembered that projecta. It took about a week, replaced some swings, and added fresh mulch. If it cost more than $25,000, I'd be shocked. Another line, $50,000 for landscaping. I knew exactly what that meant to Miranda's nephew, planting a few shrubs and laying some prefab stone edges. I'd watched it happen. The work barely looked like it cost a few grand. Then there was a so-called $35,000 security upgrade, which supposedly included new lighting and surveillance. Except I hadn't noticed a single new light fixture or camera anywhere. From my experience working with data, it was glaringly obvious. "These numbers are way off," I told her. "It looks like they're padding every project and pocketing the difference." Anna nodded, scribbling in her little notebook. "That's what I suspected." And take a look, every one of these payments was signed off by Miranda. That's when I realized, we weren't just dealing with a power-hungry HOA president. We were chasing real fraud. The next day brought a moment that showed me how much this ordeal had changed me. I was doing something completely normal, picking up a few groceries, when I turned a corner and came face to face with Miranda in the produce section. She had that smug gleam in her eye again, like she knew something I didn't. "Hope you're ready for court tomorrow," she said, her voice thick with satisfaction. She was clearly expecting fear, but this time, I didn't feel intimidated. I wasn't the same person who had considered tearing down the shed just to keep the peace. And Miranda had no idea that Anna was already 10 steps ahead. "Our legal team considers this a straightforward case," Miranda said with a smug expression. "That shed's coming down, and you'll be paying damages for all the disruption you've caused the neighborhood." But instead of feeling nervous or overpowered like I might have just days earlier, I stood taller and met her gaze directly. "Mrs. Foster," I replied calmly, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice, "we'll see you in court. Let the stronger case win." Her shocked expression was worth every ounce of stress she had caused us. "What's gotten into you two?" she stammered, her confidence faltering. "You're acting like you've got some ace up your sleeve." I just smiled and turned to walk away. "Not a secret," I said over my shoulder, "just prepared." What I didn't tell her was that Anna had been planning for this showdown with the precision and patience of a government-level investigator. Spoiling that surprise would have been a waste. Even the community atmosphere was beginning to shift. It was subtle at first, but you could feel it. A few days before our court hearing, Sandra, one of the neighbors who had originally signed the petition Miranda circulated against USA, approached me at the mailbox. She looked uneasy, glancing around nervously as if she didn't want anyone to overhear. "I think something's off with the HOA finances," she said quietly. "The numbers they're reporting, just a broken bar, don't match what I see being done around the neighborhood." When I asked her what she meant, Sandra told me she'd been casually keeping track of community upgrades and projects over the years, and nothing added up. The spending Miranda claimed had taken place seemed way out of proportion to the actual work completed. "I signed that petition because Miranda told me your wife was a problem," she admitted, clearly ashamed. "But now I'm questioning who the real problem is." Other neighbors are starting to ask questions, too. That conversation gave me a real sense of hope. Maybe we weren't the only ones who had started seeing through Miranda's manipulations. But it also made something painfully clear: Miranda had already done serious damage to the neighborhood. People were scared to speak out, afraid of retaliation. She had built a culture of fear and control. How many residents had stayed silent over the years out of self-preservation? How many legitimate concerns had been ignored because no one wanted to become Miranda's next target? That evening, Anna pieced together the final parts of the puzzle, and what she revealed finally brought everything into focus. "I've been investigating HOA corruption across multiple communities in this area," she explained, her voice shifting into the composed tone she used when discussing her work. "Miranda is just one exemplary broken bar, but she's drawing a lot of attention by going after us." I blinked. "Are you saying this was part of your work from the beginning?" Anna nodded. "Yes, my original interest in this neighborhood wasn't personal. Our HOA popped up during a broader investigation into suspicious financial activity. I had this place flagged before we ever even moved here." I tried to process what she just said. "So broken bar, you've been working this whole case the entire time?" She nodded again, but now her voice softened. "The shed issue was real, David. I was furious about how Miranda was treating us, but when someone like her brings federal attention onto themselves by targeting a federal agent's family, a broken bar, let's just say we don't ignore those opportunities." The night before our court appearance, I paced the living room while Anna calmly packed a modest briefcase. I organized our documentation and rechecked our evidence for the 10th time. Miranda had sent a flurry of increasingly aggressive letters in the past few days, and I still worried she might have enough influence to sway the outcome. Then I saw something that made me freeze. As Anna opened her briefcase to double-check something, I caught a glimpse of official documents complete with an FBI letterhead. My eyes widened. She quickly closed the case and met my gaze with a serious expression. Then she said something, almost as if rehearsing. "Miranda," Anna said aloud, "do you know what happens when federal agencies start paying attention to local politics?" The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. At that moment, I knew Miranda had no idea what was coming. "Anna drama-nest followers, comment federal if you've been suspecting from the start that Anna's been working this from day one." Court day felt like stepping into the climax of a high-stakes movie. No crowds, no cheering, just a quiet, stark courtroom with bright fluorescent lights and those stiff wooden benches that practically beg you to resolve your conflict quickly. Judge Patricia Lee presided with the weary efficiency of someone who'd handled every kind of neighborhood dispute, property conflict, and homeowners association feud imaginable. Miranda walked in looking like she was about to address the Supreme Court, a perfectly tailored black suit, her signature bob styled with aggressive precision, and enough paperwork to wallpaper an office. By comparison, Anna and I looked like what we actually were, regular homeowners standing up for what was right. She carried a single neat briefcase and wore a navy blue dress, a professional, simple, and quietly commanding. One of Anna's talents is knowing exactly how to fit in without drawing unnecessary attention. That morning, I saw it clearly as she wasn't just prepared, she was in control. Anna was intentionally radiating the image of an ordinary, unthreatening suburban wife, the kind of woman you'd never expect to dismantle a power-hungry HOA president. It was all a part of the strategy. The more innocent she appeared, the harder Miranda's eventual fall would hit. Miranda launched into her opening statement with the full theatrics of someone who had never once been seriously challenged. She stood before Judge Lee like she was delivering a keynote on civic virtue, dramatically pointing to a giant poster-sized photo of our shed that she had clearly spent money getting professionally printed. "Your Honor," she began, her tone dripping with righteous fury, "this situation is a textbook example of what happens when people think rules don't apply to them. I have spent the last 5 years upholding the standards that make our neighborhood safe, valuable, and desirable. I've protected families. I've preserved property values. I've created a space where children thrive and retirees find peace." For nearly 10 minutes, she went on and on, portraying herself as some noble guardian of suburban values, desperately fending off the chaos of unauthorized backyard structures. According to Miranda's narrative, Anna and I were rogue threats to everything sacred about whole life. We were anarchists masquerading as homeowners, out to destroy the carefully ordered fabric of the community. She produced photos, building codes, and association bylaws like a prosecutor trying to win a high-profile trial. And I'll admit, if I hadn't known the truth, her performance might have been convincing. Judge Lee listened with the detached patience of someone who had heard hundreds of these disputes before. Now and then, She glanced our way, her face unreadably maybe sympathetic, maybe just distracted by a bad breakfast burrito. Then Miranda called her first witness, her cousin, the same one who'd been parading around as her legal advisor for weeks. He gave rehearsed testimony about violations of HOA rules, tossing around legal phrases just enough to sound competent, as though anyone paying attention could tell he was more parrot than paralegal. Next, Miranda pulled out what she clearly thought would seal the deal, a letter printed on what looked like official city letterhead, supposedly from a development review committee member. The letter backed the HOA's authority and recommended we comply immediately with Miranda's demands. Judge Lee examined the document with interest, and for a moment, my heart dropped when I saw her nodding thoughtfully. "This does seem to validate the HOA's position," the judge remarked. Miranda beamed with smug satisfaction, and I felt like hiding under our table. But then Anna spoke. "Your Honor," she said with polite composure, "may I review that letter?" There was nothing in her voice to suggest the storm that was coming. Judge Lee handed it over. Anna studied the paper closely, her eyes scanning like a trained analyst who knew precisely what to look for. After only a short pause, though it felt like an eternity, she looked up. "This letter was sent from a personal email account," she said evenly. "And according to official records, the person who signed it retired from the city council just last month." Miranda's face turned ghost white. For a moment, I thought she might collapse right there in court. Judge Lee's entire demeanor shifted from mild interest to sharp alertness. "There's more going on here than just a backyard structure," Anna said calmly. The way she said it transformed our dispute into something much larger and more sinister. Miranda instantly tried to push back, her voice rising, demanding to know how Anna had gotten this information. She accused Anna of character assassination, stalking, and harassment. But Anna remained composed, standing silently until the judge granted her permission to proceed. With deliberate calm, Anna opened her briefcase and pulled out a neatly organized folder. Unlike Miranda's chaotic stack of papers, every page Anna presented looked precise and purposeful. "I'd like to present evidence of financial misconduct directly related to this case," Anna said firmly. Her tone shifted into a voice I'd heard before, the same one she used when presenting cases to senior officials. It had weight, authority, and the courtroom felt it. Miranda's objections grew increasingly desperate as Anna laid out a trail of documented fraud totaling $165,000 in misused HOA funds. The breakdown was staggering: forged invoices, inflated quotes, payments to fake companies, and Miranda's signature authorizing every shady transaction. Judge Lee flipped through the documents, her eyebrows climbing with each new page. She looked up at Miranda with the kind of expression usually reserved for someone who's just discovered their favorite relative has a secret criminal record. "Mrs. Foster," the judge said at last, "this is highly concerning." Then she turned to Anna. "Miss Mitchell, how exactly did you gain access to these federal financial documents?" The question echoed through the room like a gauntlet thrown down. And I realized, right then, this was the moment Anna had spent months preparing for. Throughout this entire ordeal, Anna stood up slowly, and something about her posture shifted as she suddenly seemed taller, more commanding, and undeniably more dangerous than she had just moments before. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and confident. Then she dropped the bombshell that shattered Miranda's world like glass. "I'm Special Agent Anna Mitchell, Federal Bureau of Investigation. This complaint about the shed accidentally exposed an ongoing investigation into HOA financial fraud in this region." The silence was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Miranda's mouth flapped open and closed like a fish out of water, her face running through shock, disbelief, and raw panic in a matter of seconds. "What?" she finally screamed, her illusion of control crumbling to dust. "This is about the stupid shed." But Anna wasn't done yet. "It stopped being about the shed when you created fake invoices and embezzled funds meant for community improvements," Anna said, her tone like ice. "Mrs. Foster," she added, with the full weight of federal authority behind her words. At that exact moment, the courtroom doors swung open. 2 FBI agents entered, followed by Officer Rodriguez from our local police department. Suddenly, every unexplained call Anna had made, Every quiet exchange with Officer Rodriguez, all of it made perfect sense. Miranda was being cuffed before her mind could even catch up to what was happening. Her protests grew louder, more frantic, more incoherent, as the reality of her situation set in. "This isn't happening. I have rights. I built this community," she shouted again and again as she was led away. Anna just watched, her expression calm and satisfied, like someone finally closing the file on a case that had haunted her for months. "You certainly built something, Mrs. Foster," Anna called after her. "Just not what the community paid for." Judge Lee dismissed all charges against Anna and me with visible relief, clearly thankful to avoid the complications of a federal fraud case in a small claims court. Miranda kept screaming about calling her lawyer, glancing back at Anna with a twisted mix of hatred and confusion that would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so serious. But the final blow came just as the doors were closing. Anna raised her voice one last time. "Mrs. Foster, about that shed? We're keeping it. Consider it a monument, a broken bar to choosing your battles wisely." The sound of Miranda's outraged shriek echoed down the hall like a triumphant fanfare. As we gathered our things, I realized my peaceful Saturday shed fix had somehow turned into the climax of a federal investigation, and my sweet suburban wife had just taken down a criminal enterprise while I stood there, speechless. "Anna," I said as we walked to the parking lot, "when you called her a small fish, a broken bar, what exactly did you mean?" Anna glanced back at the courthouse, where Miranda was likely being booked for federal crimes. That familiar mysterious smile spread across her face, the one I'd grown to love and fear in equal parts. "The real question," she said, "is how many other HOA presidents are sweating right now a broken bar, wondering if their next Anna Dramanes will knock on their door." What do you think Anna meant by small fish? Share your theories in the comments. The aftermath of Miranda's arrest was like watching dominoes fall, except each tile revealed deeper corruption and long overdue healing. Within hours, local news picked up the story. That evening, HOA president arrested in federal fraud case was the lead headline on every station. Miranda's mugshot, a once perfect bob now wild, authority erased by sheer disbelief, became an instant warning. This is what happens when petty tyrants push the wrong people. The community reaction? Swift, fierce, and more united than anyone expected, including Anna. Neighbors who had been silent for years finally found their voices, and the stories they shared revealed a pattern of systemic harassment and financial abuse that went far deeper than our own run-in. Our mailbox turned into an informal confession booth. One by one, people came to share their Miranda horror stories and offer sheepish apologies for staying quiet. Mrs. Patterson, a 78-year-old widow 3 doors down, cried as she told us how Miranda fined her $300 because her porch chair was 5 degrees off alignment. She'd been too scared to fight back and had used her grocery money to pay it. Anna listened to every story with calm compassion. She never once gloated or reminded anyone of her authority. She just encouraged them to document everything and assured them things were different now. Miranda wasn't in charge anymore, and there'd be no retaliation for telling the truth. Miranda had ruled with an iron fist, crushing anyone who dared to question her authority. But the moment she was exposed, the HOA board, day-long reduced to little more than her rubber stamp committee, snapped out of their trance. They immediately called for a full financial audit and scheduled an emergency election to replace the entire leadership structure. It turned out most of the board members had been completely unaware of just how deep Miranda's financial misdeeds went. They were just as stunned as the rest of us to discover that the community fund had been drained systematically, used to bankroll fake construction jobs by Miranda's nephew and inflated maintenance contracts with shady vendors. Meanwhile, from jail, Miranda's efforts to fight back were equal parts desperate and pathetic. She tried hiring a legitimate defense attorney with what was left of her personal savings, but not even the most cutthroat legal shark could punch holes in Anna's airtight investigation. The FBI had everything: $165,000 in stolen HOA funds traced directly to Miranda, fake invoices dating back 3 years, fraudulent payments to shell companies tied to her relatives, and a direct money trail right into her personal accounts. And it didn't stop there. As Anna Dramanes dug deeper, it became clear Miranda was just one piece of a larger, More disturbing puzzle: a network of corrupt HOA officials running nearly identical embezzlement schemes across the region. These weren't just HOA scams, they involved federal grant money earmarked for community development. When the IRS stepped in and began auditing Miranda's personal tax returns, they found she hadn't reported any of the stolen money as income. So, in addition to fraud and conspiracy, she was slapped with tax evasion charges too. By the time her case went to trial, the drama had almost fizzled out because there was simply no defense left. Faced with years in federal prison and a mountain of irrefutable evidence, Miranda accepted a plea deal: 18 months in federal prison, repayment of $200,000 to the impacted communities, 5 years of supervised release, and a permanent ban from holding any HOA authority again. The judge made it clear she was lucky. The only reason she wasn't facing decades behind bars was because she was a first-time offender and had agreed to cooperate with the broader investigation into the fraud ring Anna Drama-Nest had uncovered. And then came the healing. It started with a town hall organized by the new interim HOA board. Anna and I attended, not as the Shed couple, but as neighbors invested in helping rebuild trust and transparency. The meeting was held in the school gym, and nearly every household showed up. For the first time in years, people felt free to speak. Mrs. Patterson, still shaken, shared her story again: how Miranda fined her $300 because her porch chair was misaligned, and how she'd paid it from her grocery money out of fear. A young couple with toddlers described how they were threatened with legal action for letting their kids draw chalk art on the sidewalk. Another neighbor spoke about being fined for line-drying laundry in her backyard, something Miranda had ruled aesthetic sabotage. Through it all, Anna sat quietly, listening, not dominating, not boasting. She let the community speak, process, and vent. But when the crowd asked her to address them, she stood with the same quiet authority she'd wielded in court. "Everyone deserves a neighborhood where they feel safe and respected," she said. What happened here wasn't about rules, it was about fear. One person used her power to exploit the very people she was supposed to serve. But by speaking up tonight, you've proven that this community can't be broken, not anymore. And from that moment, things changed fast. The new board enacted transparent financial policies, outlined fair appeal procedures, and created anonymous reporting channels. Property values actually rose as word spread. Our community had cleaned house, and people were moving in because of our no-nonsense, drama-proof governance. Even Sandra, the neighbor who originally signed Miranda's petition against us, became one of Anna's biggest supporters. She eventually ran for a position on the new HOA board and won by a landslide. Her first major project, transforming the patch of land where Miranda's nephew had installed $30,000 worth of imaginary landscaping, into a thriving community garden. At the ribbon cutting, Sandra turned to us and said, "I owe you both an apology. I signed the petition because I believed Miranda's lies about you being troublemakers." Anna just smiled and handed her a small packet of wildflower seeds. "No hard feelings," she said. "But next time someone starts drama, maybe check if it's part of the Anna Drama-Nest. Thank you for not giving up on this community, even when we didn't deserve your patience." Sandra's voice trembled with sincerity, and Anna's response was pure grace, the kind of grace that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. "Everyone deserves a neighborhood where they feel safe and respected," she said again. Then she added, "Sometimes it just takes one person willing to stand up to a bully to help everyone else find their courage." The final chapter of Miranda's saga came nearly a year after her arrest. She'd served her time in federal prison and moved to another state to start over. One Saturday afternoon, I happened to be driving through the neighborhood when I saw a familiar white SUV creeping past our house. It was her, Miranda. She slowed down even more as she reached our property, eyes locked on the shed that had sparked it all. But instead of the rickety eyesore she'd once vowed to demolish, she saw something entirely different. A beautifully maintained structure, now the heart of our neighborhood's thriving community garden. Children played nearby, families tended flower beds and vegetables, and the space her corruption nearly destroyed had become a symbol of everything she couldn't control. That evening, Anna and I sat on our back porch, sipping tea and watching kids ride bikes on chalk-covered sidewalks without fear of fines or threats. Do you ever feel bad about what happened to Miranda? I asked, honestly wondering if my wife ever regretted the part she played in unraveling someone's life, even someone who had it coming. Anna didn't answer right away. She never gave easy answers to complicated moral questions. It was one of the many reasons I admired her. Justice isn't about feeling bad, David, she said finally. It's about consequences matching actions. Miranda made her choices: to steal, to bully, to abuse her power. The shed was just the excuse she gave us to expose the truth. I laughed and pulled her a little closer, grateful for the 1000th time that I'd married someone with both the courage to stand up and the wisdom to know when to let go. Can you finally close that laptop for more than 5 minutes? I teased, referring to her habit of checking work emails during our quiet time. Anna grinned and kissed my cheek. Deal. But you know what they say, she barked too loud, a broken bar, and forgot someone was listening. She glanced back toward the shed, now reborn as a symbol of unity, and added, there are battles that don't need gunfire, David. You just need to know what you're fighting for. A few months later, new neighbors moved in across the street. During their first week, the husband came by to introduce himself and ask about the neighborhood rules. Nice shed, he said, admiring the now locally famous building. Any HOA restrictions we should know about? Anna and I exchanged one of those knowing glances couples develop over years, the kind that speaks whole conversations. We're pretty flexible around here, I said with a grin. Just don't try to bully the neighbors. You never know who you might be messing with, Anna added, flashing that mysterious smile I'd learned to love and fear in equal measure. But here's the question that lingers. How many other neighborhoods are hiding secrets behind their perfect lawns and clipboard-wielding presidents? Never underestimate quiet people, and always think twice before picking fights with strangers. You never know who you're really dealing with. If this story made you smile, or gave you that sweet taste of justice, smash that like button. It really helps me bring you more Anna Drama-nest stories just like this one. And hey, if you're feeling generous and want to help me keep digging up these wild tales, there's a tip jar in the description. Every dollar helps me find more jaw-dropping HOA drama for you guys. We don't make this stuff up. Real people are just this wild. Anna Drama Nest proves it. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next unbelievable episode.